Welcome everyone to day 2 of the Office of Housing Counseling's Community Conference. I'm Karen Hoskins, a consultant and housing counseling specialist with the ICF team. We are delighted that you've joined us again today for a series of sessions and conversations on topics of importance and relevance for housing counseling agencies. Before we begin, just a reminder about the chat and Q&A boxes. The chat is being used exclusively for technical issues. If you have an issue with the technology and need assistance, that is where you would post your concern or question. The Q&A box that's found at the bottom of your screen is for questions for our speakers or anything that comes to mind for you as a question during these conversations. So here to kick off day 2 of the conference is David Berenbaum. He's the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the HUD Office of Housing Counseling. David will be joined this morning by a panel of industry experts that includes representation from the National Council of State Housing Agencies, the National Housing Resource Center, and the HUD National Intermediary Coalition. So with that said, I'll turn it over to David to get our day started.
Great, Karen. And I just want to let everyone know that I've been having my coffee this morning. I'm highly caffeinated and ready to go. I want to welcome all of you to our second day of the community conference. And I am so excited about all of the conversations and discussions that have been happening on the Hoover boards, the virtual meetups, as well as all the networking and of course the Zoom discussions that are going on throughout the first day of the program. I also hope that you found the conference opening focus on housing equity, culturally sensitive and linguistically appropriate services, our professional development as counseling professionals, and of course the discussion about the housing assistance funds and resources and guidance that are available, helpful to the work that you do, your practice as housing professionals each and every day. And I must say, wasn't Secretary Fudge's opening remarks just spot on? If you'd like to see it again, or if you didn't have the opportunity to see it, the Office of Housing just posted the video, both on LinkedIn, and also we're going to be posting it, it has been posted on the conference page. And I believe the team now is going to place it onto the Q&A box for your resource and use as well. It was just very powerful and moving to open our event. As well, I must say the feedback that I've been receiving from you via Hoover as well as on emails about how warmly you have welcomed or received, can I use the word embrace, the hashtag HUD Certified Proud has really been terrific. And I hope that all of you will use it on your signatures and also to celebrate the important role of the housing counseling profession. It is really a milestone to become a HUD certified housing counselor. And we approach your work with such pride and reverence. Thank you for all that you do. Today, we're going to open with a conversation, or I can describe it a virtual chat, with our industry partners about the state of the housing counseling industry. Originally, our new Assistant Secretary for Housing and FHA Commissioner, Julia Gordon, was planning on joining us for this opening session. And indeed, Julia was looking forward to this session and speaking with you all. Unfortunately, her mother passed away unexpectedly, and she is tending to her family. We send her our heartfelt sympathy and condolences. You're all well aware of Julia's staunch commitment to housing counseling and the important difference you make in people's lives. So much so that Julia and I both agreed that the best pivot for this opening session was to hear directly from you and your leadership, our experts, about your ideas, thoughts, and vision to continue to build upon the momentum that so many of us who have been in the field for years are now feeling. So with that in mind, I invite you to help me welcome our industry panelists, our rock stars for this session. First, allow me to introduce Ellie Pepper. Ellie, can you turn your camera on? Ellie is the Deputy Director of the National Housing Resource Center. I know that she's extremely well known to so many of you. Then we also have Greg Zagorski, who is the Senior Homeownership Policy Specialist affiliated with the National Council of State Housing Agencies. Greg, thanks for joining us. And we have Linda Davis-Demas, who all of you know for her role as one of the chairs of the Coalition of HUD Intermediaries, and of course her important work at Balance, one of our own intermediaries in the housing counseling movement. So we have a series of fun questions that I hope will provoke thought among each of our expert panelists, but also more importantly, for all of you in the audience as well as we're having this discussion. Just bear with me one moment while I rearrange my screen a little bit so I can kick off the conversation. So, ladies and gentlemen, each of you are really deeply involved in the work that the housing counseling agencies across the country do. While you approach it from subtle and unique differences, each of your organizations has been really trying some innovative approaches. You are working with the housing counseling community to really think out of the bubble on how we can really improve upon the delivery of services and who we reach. So to kick things off, I'd like to ask each of you, what is something that you're particularly proud of that your association has accomplished in the recent past that you think really can help jumpstart our activities into the future? Ellie, can I start with you?
Sure. Thanks so much, David. And I'm so happy to be here today, and I really appreciate the invite. Thank you so much. So, a big thing that happened this year was the addition to the Uniform Residential Loan Application of housing counseling. And so now, starting in March of 2023, when folks apply for a mortgage, that is one of the questions that they will be answering, is whether or not they were involved with housing counseling, and then who that housing counseling agency was. And this, I think, is going to be a sea change, right? NHRC really started working on this with other advocates back in 2015. We thought we made some progress a few years ago, but then some change in the administration at FHFA made that a supplemental voluntary part of the IRLA. So now, under the current director, it is mandatory part as of March 2023. We're going to be able to see how many people are going through housing counseling. Lenders are going to be able to look and see who did this person get together with, who did they get counseled by, so that if there are issues with their mortgage going forward, they can refer the person back. So I think that this means a lot to our industry, and couple that with the fact that we're really moving towards being part of MISMO and making sure that our housing counseling data fields are included along with mortgage industry data fields. This is really going to make a big difference, and we're going to be able to really see a big impact in what housing counseling agencies are doing.
Yeah, Ellie, your point is so well taken. Data really will drive how, in fact, many perceive the effectiveness of our work. And these are very, very significant steps forward for us. I think everyone can see the wonderful 10th anniversary logo on your background. I want to thank you for inviting me to participate in your recent programming in that space, and congratulations for the 10th anniversary to the National Housing Resource Center. Linda, let's turn to you. I mean, the network of intermediaries is really broad with very distinct focuses among the work that you all are doing. What would you like to highlight?
I think one of our biggest achievements really is just our responsiveness, right? I think intermediaries led the way when it came to completing the HUD certification for counselors, and that was something that was very important, we know, to the Office of Housing Counseling as well, to our counseling agencies. And I would say second to that would be responsiveness. I think the work that we've been able to do with groups such as NHRC, which most of the intermediary coalition members are a part of as well, just in highlighting and bringing to the forefront the work of housing counseling agencies has been critical. And there's still a lot of work to be done, but I have to say, responsiveness to the demands of the industry, to national disaster recoveries, the deployment that's been done on many fronts, that's also something that's very commendable and we're proud of for the work for our members as well.
Yeah, and we're very appreciative at the Office of Housing Counseling for the collective efforts of the community to engage in being first responders. And it's an area that in future NOFOs, we want to formalize and build the capacity of our groups to really deal with. We're so really appreciative of so many of our housing counseling teams that have actually gone on site to work with disaster recovery centers in various locations across the country over the past year. Greg, the state housing finance agencies are a critical partner to the Office of Housing Counseling. I think perhaps you've been most visible with some of the efforts in foreclosure and eviction prevention as of late. But I know so many of the states are leaders in other areas such as pre-purchase. So what would you like to highlight?
Thanks, David, and thanks to you and your team for the opportunity to speak today. As you mentioned, a lot of the housing finance agencies have been involved in foreclosure prevention, especially the Homeowner Assistance Fund, which they administer in 3/4 of states and territories. And we at NCSHA, we expected that HFAs would be taking a large role in that program. So since it was first introduced, we have, as legislation before it even passed, we've been working to try to kind of make sure that the program was set up to succeed. And we spoke to the HFAs who administered the Home Hard to Sit Fund, which was kind of its predecessor, to kind of apply lessons learned and discuss that. And we've been working to develop program infrastructure, and that has included, and something we're really excited about, efforts to engage the housing counselors directly and those involved in housing counseling. We do have regular calls with Ellie's group, NHRC, and other housing counselor and legal advocacy groups to get their perspective on how the program can succeed and how states can work with housing counseling agencies to better make the program succeed. We've talk to states about their best practices for partnering with housing counselors in their programs and have them discuss that so that they can work that out, because there are some states that have partnered with housing counselors more, and they can discuss those other states why they have done so, which we think is very helpful. In addition to that, we have worked to develop for housing counseling agencies a set of contacts that would be connected with the HAF program. So we've asked states, and we haven't gotten one for every state right now, to kind of send us who is the contact of your HAF program that a counselor should reach out to if they have a specific question about a case or there's something they feel like they need to escalate. We've worked on that, and we've also set up times for NHRC and other organizations to talk directly to state HAF agencies to kind of share their input about how they can work best with counselors. And so we really think that this has fostered some good dialogue and some good back and forth about how housing counseling agencies and HAF agencies can really work together to make these programs successful.
And Greg, that's so true. I know your efforts have really made a difference to connect our counseling community to the states so that we can reach consumers. And yesterday we heard Julian Joseph speak to the important role that housing counselors play in reaching those consumers who may not trust in the system or their servicers or others. So this partnership is critical moving forward. And I want to thank NCSHA for all of the wonderful work that you have been doing in this space. Linda, I'm going to turn back to you now for a moment. A theme, I think, or maybe even a tension in some of the conversations we're having, and frankly, across the industry at almost every event, is the need for additional resources. And at the same time as well, the opportunity and the importance of scaling our programs. So I'm wondering about your thoughts on how we can take housing counseling to the next level so that we can realize our goals, our vision for how we can really emerge as part of the marketplace. Being, when someone thinks about home ownership, when someone thinks about a relocation, it's not about thinking about speaking to a real estate professional. They also will say, let me speak to a housing counselor as well. So Linda, what are your thoughts about scaling our industry?
And David, I forgot to say before, thank you again for having us here and for OHC for hosting this. I think the scaling question is a really important one when we think back to, the evolution of housing counseling to where we are today. Data is going to be key. And I think that's going to be one of our key components to just being able to assess the number of counseling agencies, staff, how they're going to structure their networks or their agencies. I would say, in addition to that, just really being able to engage and tell their story. I think the most impactful story that we've had about our clients is the ones that we're able to share with some of our stakeholders and really highlight the work that we're doing. But I would say that from a scaling perspective, sustainability, the funding source, is going to be key, because we have many agencies that are still struggling, even with the great variety of funding that we have out there.
Linda, thank you. And of course, we're very sensitive to that challenge. And I think we're all collectively working in our own way to diversify our funding base for the housing counseling community. Ellie, let me turn to you. The same question.
Sure. Building a little bit off of what Linda said about sustainability. I mean, one of the ways that housing counseling agencies can be sustainable, it's been talked about a couple of times, right? This whole concept of housing counseling is the best kept secret. I will say that in the past couple of years, the secret has been a little smaller, right? We have made some gains in getting out there and the understanding of the importance of the work that we do. But one of the things I think that is important for housing counseling agencies to focus on, and this can be hard, I know, especially for smaller groups where the people are wearing multiple hats in one position, but focusing on marketing and outreach. It's really hard to think about that when you're trying on a day-to-day basis to really just serve your clients. But one of the things to think about is a best way to serve your clients is to make sure that everybody knows about what you're doing and the benefit of what you're doing. And marketing and outreach become really important. And in the work that we've done in outreach around the country, social media is really incredibly impactful. And again, another thing that can be really hard for organizations to pull time away from staff to focus on and deal with, but incredibly important. I mean, we found in our events that through social media, a large majority of the people heard about the events through social media, and they were largely Black consumers that we were hearing from, and they were largely people who had not heard about housing counseling before. So it really does have an impact, and it really is meaningful for the industry.
Ellie, thank you. And for those who participated in our symposium at the end of last month, we had a very detailed presentation from our recent racial equity survey and listening sessions. One of the takeaways with regard to outreach and marketing, which I felt was very probative as we start thinking about doing much more of that, was that the importance of grassroots, word of mouth, and related social media activities, in particular in different market segments, such as the faith community or in community centers, using the social media resources to reach people where they are in the community really was highlighted by our agency responders to this survey. That was also coupled with more broad, what I'll describe as ad council-like activities that reaches the mainstream population as well. So Ellie, your point is really well taken. Thank you for making that point. Greg, how about you?
Well, first of all, I would echo what Ellie and Linda both said, particularly to the importance of data. I obviously understand, David, you all at HUD have put out some great data and some reports on the aggregate impact of housing counseling, but, housing counseling agencies themselves, and again, I know that they're struggling with limited budgets, but just be able to demonstrate to the leaders in their community the impact they're having just through their own data about, it can be surprised how impressive it is to say, hey, we've helped 200 people in the community, the past 6 months. That type of message, it really does resonate, and it really does work. I'd also point out that, so I didn't quite get clear from the end, there are some state HFAs who act as HUD housing counseling intermediaries from their states, and we do have regular communication specifically with those states to talk about the issues that they face. And one that always seems to come up a lot is, while they very much like the partner housing counseling agencies, they are worried about the staffing issues, specifically simply that there does seem to be kind of a lot of turnover and a lot of staff who are leaving the industry and perhaps not finding ready replacements. So long term, obviously, one of the things is to consider is how can we get more people interested in working in housing counseling and discuss kind of the benefits of doing so and being able to make a real difference in people's lives. This is, I understand, particularly a problem in rural areas and other underserved communities. And I guess kind of related to that is, how do we get a housing counseling workforce to make sure the housing counseling workforce reflects the population that's going to serve so we can meet some of our equity goals?
Yeah, Greg, right on point. For those who had the opportunity to listen in and participate on yesterday's workforce development panel, it was spot on some of the points that you just made. For example, David Young speaking about creative ways to sustain staff or to bring new staff on board. He spoke to his personal experience where clients have become members of the housing counseling profession now. These are marvelous gems that we need to build upon, but we completely agree. We need to continue to ensure that we really retain talented staff and that they stay in the profession over the long term. Some of that connects back to resources, of course, as well. And we're very sensitive to that. But we're hoping to continue to build out opportunities as we are now with minority serving institutions and HBCUs, as well as other sources of recruitment across our partnership with all of you. Let's talk for a moment about certification. I think we have approximately 4,000 HUD-approved counselors working at HUD-approved organizations in the counseling space right now. Over 6,000 individuals have passed the counseling exam nationwide. Each month, more counselors are coming on board. I'm curious from each of your perspectives what you believe the impact of certification has been on our industry. Linda, do you want to jump in?
I would love to. So I think this has been a long time coming. I think for many of us that have been around for at least a decade, this was definitely a necessity. When you think about housing, right? When you think about what the paradigm of housing involves, everyone's licensed, loan officers, inspectors, real estate agents, and it was really just a matter of time for housing counselors to be a part of that. I think it elevates our industry to a point that was greatly needed. And I think that Greg touched on a point earlier, as well as you did, David. I think what needs to follow that, though, is we need to make sure that we give our certified housing counselors the recognition they deserve as well. And so I think that it's very important. I know many organizations are doing that currently, looking at comparative salary analysis and making sure that our counselors, we are paying competitively so that we're not losing them to other industry partners as we have in the past. I think during the last housing crisis, we had a huge wave of housing counselors that moved to servicers, mortgage servicers. And I think knowing what we see in terms of the economy in the future, we're going to continue to play a vital role, and we need to make sure that we sustain the counselors that we have. But I would say training and certification are also key. Once you receive your HUD certification, it's important that counselors continue to get specialized in different areas. And so that's where I would also bring to the forefront OHCs, the housing grants that are available for training institutions as well. So that's really important for counselors to be able to continue to empower themselves and educate so that we can empower others in the community.
Thank you for sharing that. A small thing that we haven't announced yet, but we're working on. For many years, the Office of Housing Counseling has had the Bridge newsletter. The goal was to bridge our office's role with all of the community, hence the name. In the very near future, we are going to be updating to a much more tech and modern format for this newsletter. In fact, it will no longer be a newsletter. You'll hear more in the very near future about the announcement. But we are looking to celebrate the work of our counselors across the country as part of this new format, which will be electronically delivered essentially on a regular basis to our very substantial contact list or email list that we have. So stay tuned on that, but we want to celebrate our industry's great works, and we'll be inviting everyone to share success stories with us that we can celebrate through HUD's resources. Ellie, how about you?
So, I want to double down on what Linda said about how this has really professionalized our industry. It really makes us, it really says, hey, this is an industry, and there's training, and there's a certain level of professionalism that you can expect when you're dealing with a HUD certified housing counselor. And I think this really lends itself to us being able to advocate for creating more relationships, direct relationships with lenders around fee for service. So I think that it helps in that whole process of trying to figure out our sustainability, right? Is that, here we are certified professionals. We can help you, and we can, create a situation where we can help your borrowers and make your process as a lender easier because we're involved in the process.
Wonderful. And I agree. And there are opportunities over life of loan to stay in contact with that consumer as well, as a counseling organization and the servicer. Greg, I think that your members also have certainly been active on this issue. I know when we meet on a regular basis, up until recently, it was a regular topic of discussion. So what are your thoughts?
First of all, I would agree again with Ellie and Linda. It really does kind of give a professional marker on housing counselors. And I think it can have an impact on those you're serving as well, because you can kind of show that professional marker, this home buyer, this consumer received counseling from a professional certified counselor, and that helps the lenders. That certification kind of says, okay, these is legitimate services they got that can give them a stronger consideration. And it can really, I think another diffuse impact, I'll talk about it here, it's a little obscure. One of the things HFAs do is they have their affordable home ownership programs that they finance by issuing either bonds or securities that they use to finance their affordable lending programs. And, there's a variety of reasons that HFAs are able to secure better pricing in the market from investors, which they can pass those savings along to the home buyer. But one of them is the idea that housing finance agency loans, because of the way they're structured, they can perform better than other affordable home ownership products or other lending to more disadvantaged populations. And one of the things that HFAs point to is that a lot of them require their borrowers to receive some sort of pre-purchase counseling or education. And them able to go out there now that there is this certification and say, our borrowers have received, counseling from these certified counselors who have passed this test. That's something that investors are interested in. They like those kind of standardizations and those certifications. And I'm not going to tell you that the investors are going to look into what exactly all the classifications are, but they like seeing that. And it does help secure better pricing, which secures better loans for consumers. So in addition to, I think, being good for the profession, I think this is good for the populations it serves as well.
Great, thank you. So we only have about 10 minutes left in our dialogue or conversation this morning. So forgive me, I'm going to ask 2 questions at once and invite each of you to respond to both, okay? Feel free if you need a little more time just to say pass and we'll go on. But here are the 2 questions. Very clearly, HUD and our administration has a focus on market diversity, on housing equity, and reaching underserved populations, as well as ensuring access to housing and home ownership for all groups, regardless of income, free of discrimination. As well, yesterday we heard so many thoughtful remarks related to this with regard to how we can engage with the populations we serve, how we can develop products that better reach these market segments. So I'm curious about your thoughts on what would be the most important step forward in each of your respective associations to help advance that sort of cause or that mission statement that we have together. And then as well, to begin to sort of put a positive spin and wrap things up, we're celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Office of Housing Counseling and HRC, but where do you see us in 10 years? Where do you hope the industry will be in another decade? Who wants to go first and jump in?
All right, I'll take it for the team.
Thank you, Ellie.
So listen, I mentioned this earlier. but housing counseling has really risen to the top recently. It's been part of every conversation. It's been part of disaster recovery conversation. It's been part of pandemic relief conversations. It's been part of how to address the affordable housing crisis. So housing counseling is in there and is part of every conversation. And I think that has a lot to do with all of us and what we've been doing as far as advocating for housing counseling and really understanding how housing counseling can help consumers, whether they're pre-purchase, post-purchase, trying to refinance, trying to find an affordable rental. And that's another thing, we've really grown in the rental space. We've done so much in that space and grown so much in that space. And I think that has a lot to do with the Office of Housing Counseling and the work that you all have been doing with training and really encouraging organizations to be involved in the rental space. And so the thing that I'm excited about going forward are continuing to watch how we can grow in this industry and how we can really be part of the whole process of the cycle of housing, whether it's, right from one end, soup to nuts, A to Z, right? And I'm really excited about the efforts around fee for service, and I think that's really going to help a lot with our sustainability. So I think I've answered both of the questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ellie. That was terrific. Greg, do you want to put your toe in the water?
Sure. I think there are going to be a lot of interesting developments over the next couple of years in mortgage lending pertaining to meeting populations. A lot of new options out there for borrowers. You're seeing banks start to explore special purpose credit programs, which now both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have said that they will help support as part of their equitable housing finance plans. And major banking regulators have suggested that those activities could be getting eligible for CRA credit as well, which could encourage banks to engage in them some more. You have there was legislation to create a first generation down payment program that was in Congress. It looks like that's not come to pass, but there are states now that are considering doing their own programs dedicated towards first generation homebuyers. Our Rhode Island member already has one running, and we know of a few other states that are considering that as well. So there's going to be a lot of other options that were available to homebuyers that weren't available previously. And so I think this is going to be great opportunities for counselors to help better fit consumers up with options that, can help them out that maybe weren't available before. So I kind of urge everyone to come try to stay abreast of those offerings and those developments. And of course, I think, like Ellie said, being there for the whole housing cycle, it's worth pointing out, that homeownership isn't for everyone. And sometimes it's better if someone has an opportunity to find a rental that best meets their needs. And we have obviously a real shortage of affordable housing in this country. So I can't think of a better time for counselors to be more involved in helping people find the housing that's going to best meet their situation. And so I look forward to seeing how they can play their part as we, the rest of us, try to get our part about getting more housing developed, how counselors can play their part by helping connect people with that housing. So I look forward to seeing how they can continue working with us on that. And
thank you, Greg.
I'm sure they will.
Good. Thank you. Really good. Linda.
So I think Ellie and Greg have pretty much covered the hottest topics. I would say that there are a lot of agencies across the country that, due to the pandemic and the struggles that we saw with renters, with the reduction of income and the hardships that they were facing, engaged a little differently with landlords in particular. And some of the apartment associations. And I feel like, so I don't want to say that it's something we need to do across the board, because I feel like there's some that are already doing that, and I do want to recognize that. But I feel like that is going to definitely help us when it comes to trying to bridge some of that equity bridge, or trying to make sure that it's equitable and distribution. I would strongly encourage, again, counselors to get trained to engage with their local and state. And also on the national front, I think we're going to continue to do this work as well, and to try to bring in as many agencies as we can. But when I think about the 10-year, I hope, David, that when we're reconvening in 10 years. I don't know if we're all going to be here, but I would hope that housing counseling is automatically, as Ellie mentioned, part of the IRLA now, and technology is a different piece. You can just kind of press on your cell phone and you can connect with a housing counselor. That's where I'd like to be able to see us, and we'll see if we get there. But I definitely think technology is going to be a key piece.
Absolutely. And, taking housing counseling mainstream and scaling the program are definite priorities for the role of our office in supporting all of you. So it appears we have a moment or two for a bonus question. I'll share with you that you have not heard this question before, but in our efforts to be very transparent and always listening to our stakeholders, I would ask you, what would you like to see the Office of Housing Counseling do for your constituency? How can we help you? What is a priority that you would like to see us be more active on? Ellie?
Well, what jumps to mind immediately is the NOFO. And I know that there are restrictions and there's some things that the Office of Housing Counseling doesn't have control over, but I know that, housing counseling agencies express frustration with the length of time it takes for it all to happen and for the money to actually come. And, the money comes after the work has already been done. So if there's anything that can be done around making all of that, quicker and smoother for housing counseling agencies, that would be one thing I would recommend.
Thank you, Ellie. And I noted during our conversation that point was made in the chat box as well. So well taken. The point is well taken. And we are working on that, as well as to following the federal fiscal year moving forward as well, which has been a problem in the past. Greg, how about you?
Ellie's NOFA point is certainly something we hear from the States. I won't have to exaggerate from a sooner. After that, as much, the HFA's act as intermediaries. So as much, compliance assistance as perhaps OHC can provide for some of the smaller HCAs, because they understand it can take up a lot of the talk between HCAs and intermediaries. Any sort of technical assistance, anything else that OHC can offer for smaller HCAs on compliance, I think would be most helpful.
Thank you, Greg. And Linda, you're going to be the final word today, so take it away.
Excellent. So I think we'll continue on the trend of the NOFO, which I feel is probably the biggest pain point for counseling agencies, but I'm going to take a different perspective of it. Ellie has addressed timing. I think when we look at fee for service for other models, for other programs out there, other grants that are available, I think being able to reduce the reporting burden for housing counseling agencies, which is typically the most common reason why we hear people do not want to engage in the housing counseling grant, being able to move it to a fee for service and being able to still comply with obviously OMB and CFR requirements, I think that would be a step in the right direction. And I have to say, I greatly appreciate the work that you and your team have done, David, in being able to, removing this grant where it's going to be cycling out at the end of September. And so we're getting closer to that timeline. And I know there are a lot of things that are beyond you and your team's control. I'm hoping that moving forward, we can look at that fee for service discussion within HUD.
Yes, and we are actively in discussion with all of you as stakeholders on fee for service, as well as our sister agencies in government, to find a more robust path forward for our use of fee for service, or fixed fee, or other names that it's called, as we move forward. And we are going to take the comments on the NOFO to heart. We have been, and we are acting on that. Let me also say that it is our joy engaging with each of you. And I want to express my appreciation of how you actively invite us to speak and engage and listen to all of your members, so that we can move forward together as one movement to build upon all of the work that we do. So on that note, thank you to each of you. And Karen, I believe I turn it back to you.
Yes, thank you, David, and all of our speakers. Thank you so much. So just a few logistics before we move forward with our day. We want to direct your attention again to HUVA. The conversation continues on Hoover. Take advantage of it for networking opportunities, more information about the sessions that are being held, and to connect with your colleagues from all over the country. We also would like to direct your attention to the event page on the HUD Exchange, where all of the materials and information about the sessions being included in the conference can be found. Also, if you have a question or concern and you want to reach out to HUD directly, you can use the email address located at the bottom of your screen, housing.counseling@hud.gov. And so coming up next, you have your choice of 3 spotlight focused conversations with representatives from HUD offices. The first, Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, PAVE Task Force, also offering the Office of Community Planning and Development, and the Office of Multifamily Housing and Public and Indian Housing, Office of Multifamily Housing and Public and Indian Housing. These are all spotlight, very focused conversations. So choose the one that works best for you and your information needs. And then later we will have culturally sensitive and linguistically appropriate housing counseling. And we'll end the day with 2 concurrent sessions, making a difference through partnerships with MSIs, minority serving institutions, and also housing counseling and the disaster recovery process. So links to join all of these sessions was sent to the inboxes this morning of everyone registered for the conference. So thank you for joining, and we hope you take advantage of all the great information that will be shared. This concludes this session. Everyone have a great day.